Okay, all right. I will read the speech first. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL 30A, Section 18, the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Medfield Warrant Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. As a reminder, persons who would like to listen to or view this meeting while in progress may do so by following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice. And then, as I had just mentioned, our meeting is being recorded. And then you will notice Michael and Francesca is joining us for this meeting as well. And I had sent everything in advance. So do we want to, did everyone see the minutes that Newton sent? Do you want to do that quick first?
Yeah.
Did
Good idea.
anybody have any comments or questions on Newton's minutes from the, it's just the 27th. I think we were caught up otherwise, right?
Look very accurate to me. I move to
Yeah, I
accept
have no
them.
questions.
Okay, is there a motion?
A motion to approve the minutes of October 27th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Jeremy,
Yeah.
Newton,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes.
And I vote yes too, so those are approved. So in the interest of moving forward, I've asked Christina and Nick if they would just start us off to go over their packet and whatever else they would like to tell us.
So I just have a question. I see, Michael, that you're here. Is there anybody else that wants to be promoted from the school committee or Dr. Marsden?
I think, yeah, Dr. Marsden wants to come in, I believe.
I think he just let me know.
No.
Got
Anybody
promoted,
that
huh?
Mike thinks should come over is welcome to Red Rover. Red Rover, come over.
I don't know whether you call it a promotion.
Although right now we have the perfect like Brady bunch. We're going to toss onto a second screen, but that's okay.
I know. Hold on, let me just make sure. Okay. Let's see. So just to get started, I know we've talked about this at the last couple of meetings, but it was at a meeting on October 23rd, I believe, that we were meeting with Sharon, Ed, Jess, myself, Michael, Dr. Marsden. Were discussing where we were in the budget. Let me just promote, hold on, sorry. And there was some discussion about fiscal year 21, and there was a request for the additional revenue that had been decided upon with an agreement with the governor and the legislature. So in talking about that, there are only two options in order to make that happen. One is for the Board of Selectmen to call a special town meeting and to change the appropriations for those budgets. The other, which is the recommendation that we're suggesting, is that we use the local aid numbers that we used at the town meeting in June, and that we do a special article, a regular article, I should say, an article at the annual town meeting, and appropriate the funding for the COVID items that are above and beyond the budget that was presented back in June.
And that's assuming it's basically COVID items that aren't going to be funded by any kind of grant or aid.
Right.
Correct.
So we can talk
Yeah.
about that further. And I know you wanted Michael to go through some of their expenditures, but we do have CARES money. There is the 102 grant that was given to the schools. So we do have some money available for COVID expenditures, but it's my understanding there's some concern that without an additional package after December 30th, that we may actually go above and beyond those budgets. So
Gotcha.
I'll let Michael speak to his budget concerns about that.
Before we do that, Christine, can you go back on that article again? Where were you going to get that money from?
So if we use the lower state aid numbers on the tax recap sheet, and those are the numbers that we presented at town meeting, When we get to the end of the year, that additional revenue that came in will close out to free cash. So we would do an article at the annual town meeting and appropriate the money from there. Similar to how we did the police contract last year.
Okay.
That's the free cash.
So
Correct.
the free cash is, what's that free cash certified number then? How much is that?
So I'm not talking about the certified number. So we know that we have additional revenue coming in through UGA and Chapter 70 that we did not account for it at the town meeting.
Oh, okay. The chapter
So we-
70 is like.
Yeah, so we know we
600.
have that amount of money that will close out to free cash at the end of the year. So anticipating that, we would do an article at the annual.
It's basically just pushing, it's
Yeah.
almost like doing the same thing, but doing it later so we don't have to squeeze in a town meeting the
Yeah,
day
and
of
that is, but
Thanksgiving.
that assumes there's enough money to cover all those incremental expenses. I mean, just through December 30, we're gonna have a shortfall, and we haven't talked about the second half of the year yet.
Well, if
Right.
it exceeds that amount of money, we have a lot bigger issues because there is no other available funding.
I know, but I mean, isn't that,
I mean,
Well,
we're hoping
let's-
there's going to be what's being referenced as a CARES 2 or a stimulus
Right.
package. So we're hoping that's going to come through as, and cover those costs for January through December. I don't think there's anybody that denies that there's additional COVID costs that nobody's accounted for.
So I guess the question is for Michael and Dr. Morrison to show us what the numbers are, what that kind of exposure is. That was a question.
Michael,
yeah,
So Sharon, do you want to bring up the spreadsheet I sent you?
Christine, while
Mike, do you
Sharon's
have it or do you want me to grab it?
doing that, the article at annual town meeting would be to appropriate dollars to cover budget shortfalls generally or to a specific department?
No, I think it would be to a specific department. You would have to outline it.
Okay.
It couldn't just be a generic article.
So if there's enough money to go around, it would be schools and any other town department that might have that shortfall.
Yes, we're not anticipating one at this time on the town side.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
But this additional revenue is essentially the 10% of Chapter 70 that was estimated to be reduced, right? So that's the money we're talking about.
Yeah.
So that has a sort of a dollar amount to it, and also really was earmarked for school use anyway.
The Chapter 70 money would be 561,023, and the local aid, which is the unrestricted government aid, is 115,138.
Okay, so there was also the local government aid as well in this 10%
Correct.
reduction.
Are you all seeing the spreadsheet now
so
or no?
that's the 670, yeah.
Yes?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay,
So would you like me to just quickly go through that?
that'd be great.
Okay, so the school has had 3 different funding sources, which is the operational budget, which I'm going to go through at the bottom. The 102 grant, which was the $225 per student that was allocated to the school for code expenses. And then the CARES Act, which the town received, and I believe it was about 1.2, Christine, correct?
Yes, 1.1.
1 point, okay. So those are the 3 different funding sources that we have been using to offset our cost for the unexpected COVID expenses. So as of today, under the, from, I believe this is 10/30, I should say, under the 102 grant, we have expended $309,059.72 from the 102 grant. And those include additional nurses for the schools in order for us to continue with the COVID requirements. It's additional staffing for custodians. We had what we call the reopening stipends for staff members that participated throughout the summer to help with the reopening plan that Dr. Marston posted on our website. And then a lot of the other stuff is PPE, such as gloves, hand sanitizer, There's two types of hand sanitizer. We have the one that 16.9 ounce bottle that sits on desks for classrooms that have sinks in their classrooms. And then for the ones that don't have sinks in the classroom, we have the wall-mounted hand sanitizer, which is a different type of product. We have disinfectant wipes that we provide for every single classroom. Masks, cleaning supplies, which is the disinfectant that we're using to disinfect the classrooms or the schools, I should say. We purchased filters. Those are the MAR 13s and the MAR 8 filters, which is a requirement in order to operate the schools. We also did some HVAC repairs this summer to get the systems up to speed. We purchased air purifiers for Dale Street and Wheelock because they don't have HVAC systems that are modern. It was IT. We had IT such as in the grant. We purchased speakers. We purchased cameras. We purchased some Chromebooks to help support students and teachers. And then the other category, which is one-time expenses that we had in order to open up the schools. So those costs came to about $309,000. We are projecting moving forward through the 225 grant. Now, I forgot to say that earlier, that both the 225 grant and the CARES Act both expire as of December 30th, which means that all expenses occurred from July 1st to December 30th can only be charged to either the 102 grant or the CARES Act. Any expenses beyond December 30th cannot be charged to these two grants because
well, except for the PPE under the CARES Act, you can buy your PPE through June 30th.
Okay. So that being said, what we did was we mapped out where we're at, how much the costs are for PPE and cleaning disinfectant on the school side, and we tried to reallocate those costs between the 102 grant and the CARES Act, so it would take us through December 30th. So on the 102 grant, we're looking at an additional $256,365 that we'll be spending, and then in the CARES Act, we're looking at about an additional, I should say, $35,649. So in the CARES Act, we have already expended $438,151, and most of that was for, and Jeff can elaborate on this, was for devices that we purchased for the teachers, which were laptops that we purchased for the teachers because there was a need if we were in remote and hybrid that they needed a device that was better for their wireless and Zoom contacts with students.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Michael, that a lot of the feedback that we got after the spring was there were a lot of technology issues that teachers had during their Zoom meetings with students. And at that time, a lot of the teachers were using an older version of our Chromebook, which really isn't made to do a lot of the live streaming or Zoom meetings. So it was really important for us to get better and upgrade the technology that our teachers were using. And we checked out 3 or 4 districts that were Mac based and that were using MacBook Airs in the springtime, none of which had any issues at all with Zoom. So we thought it was an important thing. And feedback from teachers has been that it's really changed everything they do in the classroom in terms of Zoom, because they're able to hear students, they're able to stay online, not get kicked off, and the clarity is fantastic. So especially with Zoom is really important because our teachers can do breakout rooms in Zoom, which you can't really do in Google Classroom. So it allows teachers to work in small groups with kids off to the side while the other group is working on something else. So it was a really important purchase for us, and the CARES Act was critical in that purchase.
Thank you, Jeff. So as you can see, from July 1st through December 30th for the 102 grant, we're going to be spending $565,425, which was
which is the max.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the cost of that grant. And then we're projecting for the CARES Act, I want to say about $450,000 currently. So then it comes down to what we're projecting for our operations. Sharon, do you mind just?
Yeah, just scroll
Thank
down.
you. No, I appreciate that. So currently, due to COVID-19, we had to add teachers and teaching assistants, both to support students remotely and to support students who are face-to-face in a hybrid model.
So Mike, I could just for 1 second. So one of the things, if you don't have kids in our schools, one of the things that we're required to do from the state was to develop a platform where students can go fully online. So we call it in Medfield Cohort D. So those are our families that really felt like it was safer for their kids to be remote during the school year and not be in person at all and not participate in a hybrid. So right now we have about 120 of those kids. And we look around to other districts. I think of some around here like Needham, Wellesley, Medway. I mean, some of those districts had to hire so-called principals just to oversee their online cohorts because there's so many kids that are doing that. So with 120, it was a little bit easier for us to do that. However, it's still an unfunded mandate because we're required to do it. Yet we need to have teachers in assistance in some cases to work with students that are remote. And that obviously we couldn't have budgeted for that in FY21. So that's where you see some of the increases. And some of the increases that you see in the 10.3 are also elevating some part-time staff to full-time to do additional coverage. So for instance, if we had special education folks that might be doing services to our in-person students, because we have that cohort D, we needed someone to provide those services for students in the remote school as well. So we had to take them, say, from a 0.6 to a 1.0, which adds the 0.4 on. So it's a combination. It's not just a straight 10.3 people. It is an increase of other part-time staff that were already there. The other piece is with our TAs is that in order to not have folks come in from the outside to say substitute teach or work with our kids, and to have one of the things that we're doing with our cohorts at the elementary level is having the students eat lunch in their classrooms. So in order to have coverage around that and to space kids out for different areas at recess, we had to hire additional teaching assistants to do that as well. So those are all one-year appointments that we did, the extra ones, and we'll see where we are in the spring. We may or may not have them, but we'll see where we go with the virus at that point.
Thank you, Jeff. So moving forward, so the teachers, as Jeff said, there's about 10.3, those are FTEs. It's approximately $18,943 per pay period. And we calculated out if how much that expense would be for this, for the school year, which would be moving forward, which is $435,697. That was unexpected. That last column where it says 50,000. So as of when I did this report, only the September expense were in munis at the time. I did get a figure that I'm going to share with you in a little bit about what the cost would be from September through December for our teachers and TAs, and I'll share that in a minute. But I just wanted to go through the spreadsheet again. The TAs, it's a 10.8. It's about $10,000 per pay period, which is about $191,000. Now, I also want to say that in September, not all positions were quite yet all hired. So, I won't say a lot, but there was a good number of TAs that were hired in October. So our payroll went up in October from September. So that, again, moving down to the nurses, you're going to say, well, you have the nurses in the 225 grant. What I did was I took from January through June, what would be the cost for if we kept the additional nurses, which is about $4,900 per pay period, which would be an additional $83,700. And that's the cost that would go from January 1st all the way through June. And same thing with
Michael, just to add, the custodians and the nurses are per diem rate.
Yes, they're both per diem rates, correct. And then, so the custodians, which was about 3.4, again, $5,200 per per pay period, which is about an additional 62,500 from January through June. And then I added in there, again, January through June for kindergarten rebarring teachers, which is about 5. And then we had another 5 TAs. And you're going to say, why'd you put that into the operation? Well, currently we are charging only half of the tuition for kindergarten because we're in a hybrid model. If that changes, if we leave a hybrid model and go, let's say, to a full day model, then we can start charging a full day tuition to those kindergarten students. But currently, because they're in a hybrid model, we're only charging half the tuition. So we are losing about approximately $253,000 in tuitions, and we have to offset that cost. So in order to offset that cost, I have to put them into the operational budget. Again, that could change as we move forward. I can't answer that question right now, but I need to project what the worst scenario is, and the worst scenario is we would be losing 253,000 in revenue. So I would have to move those into the operational budget. And then I looked at what we need for PPE to move forward. So I did those calculations. Again, those are an estimate, and those could change, but I did the best possible projection that I could on that. So we're looking at an additional about $1.1 million that we would need to offset our operational costs. And these are all co-related. On our meeting with this, with our workshop with the school committee, they asked Jeff and I to actually approach our Christine and the Warrant committee and the school committee to see if we can take some of these costs and move them into the CARES Act for the months of September through December, and what would be the cost that we would be asking for to move forward. And earlier today, I had a conversation with Sharon, and I said, and with Christine, that if we decide to move the teachers and the TAs, because those are the two costs that we could move into the CARES Act, because those are all related to COVID expenses, what's the cost that we would be moving over is the first question. And the second thing is, if we're moving the cost of salaries, we should also move over the cost for the benefits for these individuals. So when I went back and looked at what our September, October expense was for salaries, and then I projected out for the months of November and December, that number came out to approximately $226,000. So if you look at what we spent in September, which was about 54,000, it makes sense considering that we had more hires in October than we did in September. So we're looking at about 226,000 just in salaries. And what I have to do is, and I'll work with Nick and I'll work with Kathy Vandermoot to see which individuals out of this, call it 21 FTEs, actually have benefits, and then add those benefits to that number. And I would provide it not only to the school committee, but also to the Warrant committee in the selectmen. But as of right now, if we're looking at salaries alone, that we're looking to hopefully move into the CARES Act, because that's what the school committee asked Jeff and I to do, would be approximately $226,000.
And then, am I correct to understand, since Christine, you said you could pre-buy the PPE, could potentially the PPE that's in the operating move over to CARES too?
So yeah, so I could have that again, Christine and I can have that conversation, which would be what you see in the bottom there. So if you look at Sharon, that it's 226,000. There's a possibility, and I again, there could be another 253,000 if you look at the revolving account. So we're looking at about $500,000 out of that 1.1. So it would still be, in a deficit of about 600,000. And these are just projections. So my goal, and I should say, and Jeff's goal is that we're going to provide a budget to versus actual to the school committee every month, so we know if we're on track or hopefully we're tracking correctly. But if it would be, it's a model that we've used in the past, and we want to use this year on a monthly basis just to see where we stand and how we're moving forward.
And that's this tab that
Correct.
you're talking about.
So,
And can I add one other request, and maybe it's going to be inside of your monthly piece? I mean, just the one thing that is in my head right now, like you figure there's probably some things that you budgeted for that you're not spending. So like if we just take substitutes as an example, if you're not using substitutes, right, you're potentially saving at least a little bit there. Now, mind you, the cost for the TAs and everything else is probably more expensive than that. But am I right to assume that when you do this monthly piece, when you're doing your budget versus actual, clearly those people were in the budget, and if they're not happening, that savings is going to slightly offset the
Yeah,
additional,
so-
for say, like maybe the TAs that were covering the subs? I don't know.
But Sharon, I would just say, just on that example for the substitutes, you know, in that line item is also long-term subs as well.
Yeah.
So when we have maternity leaves and those kinds of things, which we still have going on right now.
Yep.
So there is some savings, but it's not like we're saving a ton around that area.
No, I don't. I don't expect that you are, but I'm just kind of wondering that when you put this entire workbook together, one would assume that there's potentially at least maybe a couple of things, in my hopeful thing, that's in your budget that you're not spending. So maybe we get a little bit of savings there.
Mm-hmm.
No, granted, your new operationals are probably higher than that, but
So Sharon, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the goal is to provide, you know, the information on a monthly basis. You know, and we can have that conversation because that let's say the substitute line for teachers comes into that instructional service because that's how
Yeah.
we report it to the state. So, for instance, if a typical year expense is 19%. And our actual expense, it looks like it's 19%, and that includes the COVID. That's when we would say, okay, why is it equal? And then we could turn around and say, you know, we're not spending as much money in substitute, and we can give you those reasons and those line items.
yeah.
So I mean, that's what our objective is. So today, I was, and I didn't get a chance to do it, and I wanted to do it for this meeting, but I was going to look into our utility costs and to see if there was a rise in our utility costs because we are operating systems a little bit differently than we have in the past.
Yeah.
So we're required to a minimum to have what they say a fresh air intake, which means you have to change the air in the classrooms at least three, you know, I want to say 3 times per hour, right? Which
Mhm.
means in an engineering, and I probably, I'm not explaining it correctly, but we have to, you know, when students are in class, we change that air a certain times per hour, which means we have to bring in a certain amount of fresh air. So it would be 70% fresh air has to be fed into the classrooms 3 times within an hour frame. So those are things that we're doing. We're also, when the building is not occupied, and for the first 4 hours, which before students come into the classroom, we're moving air 100% throughout that hour. That means that our vents are open 100%, and it's all fresh air coming into the buildings. As students come into the building, it changes to about 70% of fresh air coming in. That costs money because that's running these systems a little bit different than we have in the past.
Yeah, and put that in perspective, we typically run 15 to 20% fresh air, you know, prior to COVID. So these systems are really working hard, and I assume that the electrical costs will reflect that.
So, and then as we get into the heating season, because of that, and because we're required, Jeff and I were at a meeting on Friday, or actually 2 different meetings, but one had to do with facilities and the guidelines. We thought that the guidelines were going to be changed a little bit, but they had a scientist from the Harvard School speak to us, and their recommendation is that we still leave windows open in classrooms all winter long, which again means that now you're heating classrooms and that heat is going out the window because we're required to keep the windows opened in classrooms all winter long.
That goes against everybody's mama's directions when they were a kid.
That's right.
Correct. Jeff, what was his question?
Do you live in a barn?
I know.
Yeah.
I think he basically, because someone said, how does this make sense? And how do you deal with,
Winter.
with the weather, and he said, well, make sure that everyone wears coats and gloves. That was his response.
Wool hats and gloves are not out of the question this year in Massachusetts schools.
There you
Don't
go.
worry, we've
Could
been
those,
doing
could those, wait, can we get those as extra PPE?
I was gonna say, when Mike was here, the town hall was always used to wearing hats and gloves during the winter, so. it
That
can
is-
be
Oh
done.
my
that is
God.
Yeah. So
Jeff knows.
So,
again, that's going to affect our utilities. I didn't take in consideration because I don't even know what those costs are going to be. But we're hoping, just like Christine is, that there is a second type of CARES Act or stimulus
Yeah, right,
package,
something.
which will help offset these costs because we're not the only district or town that's in this situation.
Christine, from the spreadsheet that you had sent us for what the town has already sent, it
Mhm.
looked like between Michael's numbers and yours were probably spent maybe around like between 650,000. Is that about right? Out of like the $1 million.
Yeah, that's about right.
That's-
Nick can go over exactly the issue. You're required under the CARES Act to submit everything through FEMA first to determine if it's eligible for FEMA.
Yeah.
So we have some pending items with FEMA, so I can't give you the total of what's left until we find out what's been rejected by FEMA. But
Right. So I think my basic question is there seems to be there's something available, right? So
yeah,
that if
at a minimum, we have 463,000 left in the CARES Act.
so
Is
in
that-
theory, between the four, like you and Nick and Mike and Jeff, all putting your heads together to figure out what's really left for the town to get and what's really left for the schools, it seems like if there's enough in this between what you have left on the town side and what they have left on the school side, it seems like hopefully maybe we could try to maximize that and lower some of this operation issue they're having.
I think it's important that we try and get everything we can out of both those sources of funding.
Well,
Yeah.
if you have 463,000 left in the CARES Act, wouldn't that first step, as Mike suggested, is to take the salary and benefits of some of the teachers and TAs and charge it there, so you fully exhaust the CARES Act? And instead of,
Absolutely. There are some costs that the town, so I need to finalize what cost and PPE I'm gonna have through June, but yes, a significant amount of that can go.
right,
to-
so some piece of that, and then I think I agree with Karen, somewhere in that 650 to 7 is somewhere around there is probably what will be left over, and that's just about equal to the incremental Chapter 70 and state aid. If I'm doing my math right.
I like your math. Your math is the same as what's in my head.
Yeah,
Okay,
same.
Yeah.
well, that's good.
And then, because in theory, to go back to what Christine had said at the beginning, so I'm just going to round the numbers for the heck of it. Let's say there's an extra 650,000 in, state aid that's coming in, and going back to your theory that if this kind of monthly, we maximize CARES Act, we assume we can do that, and then, Mike and Jeff are doing this monthly budget versus actual in a wonderful planet. If we can keep that to the 650, that would be awesome. And then if things get worse or things get changed, maybe we'll have something from more aid coming in that would help too. But if that's our target, that's at least a decent place. I feel like at least that's a place that we can get to if we're saying we're going to take all that extra Chapter 70 and put it towards offsetting all of this stuff for the schools in
I mean, I
April,
find it hard to
May.
believe, and Jeff, let me know if I'm off track here, but with the governor making those statements that he made on Friday, pushing everybody to get back to school, it would be hard not to recognize that there are costs associated with that from January to June. So I think there has to be some sort of the legislature or the state has to address that at some point. I think Jeff agrees with me.
I think you did. Your eyebrows did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, what we're hearing too, and I know we brought it up already, is that second stimulus in that there'd be a second stimulus that would go directly to school districts, much like what happened when Biden was vice president with the ARRA money that went right to school districts. Ed, you were in Mansfield at the time. Remember that? I mean, that when I was in Rentham then, I mean, that really saved a ton of jobs and that really helped us out a lot. So if they can allocate it in that same way, we'll be in decent shape and allowing us to carry it over to FY22. I mean, that's the key. So
Oh, that'd be super.
that's what they did in 08, 09, and hopefully
Right.
that's what will happen again. But we'll see what happens.
So Mike, I got a question on your budget versus actual that you're reporting to the school. Did I hear you say that within the actual are all of the COVID expenses as well?
Yeah, so unless we reallocated them to either the
The
CARES
CARES or
Act
something.
or the
Right.
102 grant, we're gonna carry them in the operation, because I mean, Ed, you can, disagree, but I think what we have to do is realize what the true costs are. Because what if these costs don't go away next year? We don't know that, right? So I think if we look at the true costs that are coming out of the operation, then we'll have a better understanding as we move forward.
Yeah, I guess I hear you, but I guess then you have some trouble with the, because the budget doesn't assume any of that. So it's kind of a little bit of apples and oranges, because you're adding the unexpected expenses into, measuring against a budget that didn't expect those expenses. So it's a little apples and oranges, but I guess we know what they are going forward, so we can always break it out when you need to.
Yeah. So the biggest expense is the salaries, which we have on a separate spreadsheet. So I have a payroll spreadsheet that has all the COVID expenses on it for salaries. So I can pull that up at any
You
time.
pull it up whenever, yeah.
I can
Right.
tell you month to month what those costs are. With the PPE, because we are being audited from the state, and if you can see, Sharon, that 102 grant.
Do you want me to go to this one?
Yep. So
Okay.
this is how we're tracking all of our PPE or expenses, because this is how the state wants us to report it to them by invoice. So we're going to continue to do that, Ed. So if
Yeah.
you ask, what are the additional costs, I'm going to have this spreadsheet that can break it out. What I'm saying is, because we're going to be paying them out of the operational, we're going to show them there, but we're going to have the backup to show you where those actual expenses are coming from.
Right. I was just kind of thinking forward when we do the next year's budget, the 22 budget, but that's fine.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions on this piece?
I'm just curious, how far out does this, do these supplies cover us, right? Like when you make the order, how far out do the supplies actually cover you?
That's a really good question.
So, Sharon, can you go to the master sheet for a second?
Yeah.
Thank
got
you.
If you guys would be shocked at what we use for disinfectant wipes per month. Shocked.
So
I have
have the
little ones.
number.
I probably have somewhat of an idea.
We're going through 80,000 sheets per month for disinfectant wipes. And that's 4 days a week, 5 buildings. It's about 80,000 wipes that we're going through per month. And then if you look at the hand sanitizer, we're going through a lot. I forget, we receive in one pallet is about 400 bags of hand sanitizer, and we're purchasing about 5 pallets a month.
Wow. And then on the IT, when we've had to order new equipment to adjust for the needs, which is completely understandable. What are we doing with the old equipment? And when we look at these numbers, are we looking to leverage some of what we've had to give up to offset what we're spending?
Yeah, so some of the old equipment that the teachers had, for instance, we passed it down to the kids. So one of the things that we've had to do in order to make sure that everyone was online during the hybrid is that we had dedicated Chromebooks that we use just for MCAS. So MCAS make us put another unfunded mandate, by the way. MCAS, they make us put software on the Chromebook. We don't wipe it clean. We leave it on there and we distribute that to the kids as they take MCAS. We had to wipe those clean and send those out to families that needed Chromebooks for the hybrid. So now we're down all of those MCAS Chromebooks right now. We should be getting an additional shipment in at some point, but anything that we don't use, like for the teachers, so to speak, we'll go to the kids or we'll send them out to the families. But I mean, everything is in use right now. We have all that tracked, where they all are, how many per building, et cetera. We outfitted the classrooms at Memorial with with iPads. So we took some of the iPads out of Blake and took some of the stations there and put them down in Memorial so that those kids could use them because they're more user friendly for that age group. So we've allocated everything that we purchased over the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Sharon, I have a question for Michael, if I may.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Michael, this is second time I've seen this schedule and I'm still trying to figure it out. So there's a line 19, it says total 102 grant. Column H, is that what you've expended through September or October?
October 30th.
October 30th. And those are all 102 eligible expenses, correct?
Correct.
So, okay. And column F is your projection through December?
Through December 30th.
And again, 102 should cover those. So that 560 or so, whatever it is, should be covered by 102?
Yes.
Okay. The next line is 29. That's the total CARES Act.
Mhm.
And you've spent 438,000 already. And that went over to Christine's schedule as to CARES 1, 2, and 3. So that in part, that is spent, and we're seeking reimbursement under CARES. In column F, you've projected through the end of the year other CARES eligible expenses. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So far we're in the good. We've got everything covered. Down below operations, these are costs that may be reimbursable under CARES. Is that correct? The 54,000 expended to date and the $1,092,000.
Correct.
That's your projection through what, the end of the year, or through, excuse me, calendar year, or through the end of the school year?
Yeah, so under the operations, Newton, those are the projections till June 30th.
Okay. And from that $1,000,001, actually, you're thinking that there are items there, and it seems that some of the captions coincide with CARES, that are CARES eligible. So you want to tease out those, as you said before.
Mhm.
And I guess the estimate was, what? You
It was
could
at least,
tease out about
a couple hundred thousand.
463?
Yeah, we don't really know because Christine still had some more costs to incur
Well, that's
Right.
on the town side. That's
on the town side, but they're gonna charge it to CARES as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
$1,137,000.
Assuming zero on the
for both
town
town and
side.
School.
Michael, you'd try to tease out as much out of this operations side as possible to cover CARES.
Yep.
Yes.
Now, but you have to expend funds, don't you, through 12/30? And you said that these are through the end of the school year.
Correct.
So Newton, I think that like some things like the PPE, they're allowed to
Might have been
pre-buy,
spent.
but
Sure.
like something like the teachers and the TAs, like that was the math Michael was talking about that he needed to do to figure out how much their salary and benefits cost the town through December 30th, because that
Correct.
can't go any further. Correct,
Correct.
Michael?
Correct.
Just,
Yeah.
thank you. That helps my understanding. And
Could
that
you
will make the
reclassify
moves clearer.
expenses going backwards though?
Yeah, so we can from July 1st through December 30th, we can do a journal entry to move those from operation into the CARES Act. And that's what the school committee asked us to. We haven't put anything into CARES currently that's not that's salary. So this is something that we were having a conversation with the school committee. We're bringing to the Warrant committee. I had a discussion with Christine today. We're looking to move about 226,000 of incurred salary costs between teachers and TAs that were from September through that will go through December.
Did those have to be unbudgeted or am I remembering?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
they
Yeah.
have to be unbudgeted.
Who's call? And
Gotcha.
They have to be-
Anybody else have
they have
questions?
to be
And just a
budgeted
question,
and
just
for
a
COVID.
follow, I'm sorry, go ahead, Christine.
No, just they need to be unbudgeted and you have to be able to justify them that they're hired due to COVID.
Mhm.
So so just Michael, so you're saying is that in addition to that 226, there will be, depending on what's available from Christine, we could take some costs out of there, and if it's available in the town care side, to reduce that 109 to less the 226 further?
So no, that 226 currently is in that 1.1 million, call it. So
Right.
so what I'm saying is that I feel, and the superintendent feels, that all these costs that we incurred between teachers and TAs is due to COVID-19. So we would like to move those into the CARES Act. And Christine, agrees that yes, first they have to go through FEMA to see if they're eligible for FEMA, and then from there they go into the CARES Act. Correct, Christine?
Correct.
And there's benefits that are associated with some of these hires that we should also consider to put into the CARES Act.
But so that 1092, which is the total exposure right now, we can see a path to reducing that to somewhere around 300,000. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
If it's available through the town's care, is that right, Christine?
I think that's reasonable.
Okay. All right, so the going through into January to the end of the school year, the exposure as calculated here, and I know it's an estimate, but it's well thought through, is around that $700,000.
Is it, just out of curiosity, are there any other grants out there from COVID besides these two, even if they're small ones?
Christine and I worked on the one really, really small one today.
Did somebody give you $10?
I got
10,000.
6,000. Michael
Oh,
got
there you go.
4,000.
So that was a 10,000. We're looking at every single possible
Yeah.
opportunity. I mean, it sounds promising, as the superintendent said, that there could possibly be a second phase of this starting January 21st. But we're waiting for that.
Yeah. Understood.
Well, they always say hope's not a strategy, but it sure is now.
Has been since March.
Does anybody else have any other questions on this, or do you have anything else you want to go through, Christine?
Well, I just want to say, having sat through the school committee meeting and gone through this again, Michael, you and Dr. Morrison done a great job. It's really it's a terrific effort, and very encouraged by the amount of I think just the amount of transparency and open disclosure that you folks have made is huge for us, because we have a tough year ahead of us, as we all know, and this helps relieve some of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Sharon, can I bring up one thing?
Yeah, sure.
So it's probably, I just want to kind of plant this seed to think about, and I know it requires action probably by the Board of Selectmen in that regard, but given the fact that, there's a lot of changes coming in the spring, we don't really know exactly where we're going to be, financially. The state won't get their act together till, late spring, early summer. We could have a stimulus or we could not. I just think if we could maybe consider adjusting the dates of when, especially the school budget is done, because we will have it all ready, but the fact that we present this to the town as a public hearing at the end of January. So you got a change in administration that will be in for a week or so. And there's a lot of work that's going on in terms of whether it's going to be a stimulus or however that's going to look. we're not going to really know where we are in FY21. Like Michael said tonight, we don't know what electric bills are going to be because we could get really slammed as we go forward running these systems as much as we're running. I just think if we were to delay that even a month or two so that we have a really good idea of where we are as a community, as a country, as a town, so that we have a really good sense of our budget instead of this, if any years to do this, like even now, without the pandemic and in January, there's a lot of what ifs. And we present a budget to the community and to you folks with a ton of what ifs. And there'll be even more what ifs in January. And I think if we could prolong that process a little bit longer so that we maybe have a good idea of what's going to happen in the federal government, the local state government, so that it's more real as opposed to, well, this is what we think we need right now. We could come in at a 4%, and by the time town meeting comes around, we could need a 5 or 6%, or conversely a 3% or a 2%. We don't know. So just something to think about, maybe a conversation at the board level tomorrow. But just to, I think it's in the town charter, Christine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was gonna be my
that's what
question.
I
What
was gonna
governs
say.
that?
I don't think that the Board of Selectmen have the authority to change that
They don't.
because it's a charter requirement.
Okay.
I think we can all have a discussion about it, but I don't think they can actually change that date.
I feel like, Jeff, I feel like if we can't change the date, you just put asterisks all over your sheet that says,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
This is my guess. And then we just keep talking like we're talking now, right? Like we have that kind just keep all this open communication, put in what you think, and then we have to just keep talking about it because it's going to have to come from somewhere, and none of us know where that is, right? And the town side, I hate saying the town side. We have to be like, I don't know what I'm going to call that besides town. But anyway, Christine's side.
I was just going to say, she's going to say Christine.
I don't know what the word's going to be, but I mean, they're going to have some of the same problems, right? Because as we all know, when we looked at the last spreadsheet, we were already in trouble with everybody at zeros, right? So, but if there is going to be more aid of some kind, and if there is good, like it's going to help the school side, it's going to help the town side, it's going to help everybody. And so asking anybody to do budgets in the same situation you are in January is going to be the same exact problem, which is.
Karen, I'd add a note to that because I 100% agree. And Jeff, I totally understand your issue. And given the magnitude of your number, I'm totally in agreement. But in the context of the town number, which is what we're working on, and I think it's really important, I think, to get the best guess estimates information all in one bucket as soon as we can, but with the understanding amongst everybody that this thing is fluid, and it's, as I said to somebody, when you squeeze a balloon, it doesn't show 2 bumps, it shows 1. And so the sooner we get all the pieces into the balloon, because everything's going to be done in context, right? I mean, there's some numbers that are variable, and there are some numbers that are fixed. And once we get them all in there, we're going to have some hard conversations. But I really think the progress. And as I said, I at the school committee meeting, I was, when Jess gave her opening statement, it was very, very positive towards, hey, we're all in this together. And I think we have to go with that open sentiment that we understand that things are changing for everybody, and it's not a locked in number, and it's not the situation where the first person who says a number loses. It's the more information we can work off of, the sooner I think the better we'll be.
Yeah, and I totally get that, Bob, and we'll have it all ready. It's just, I just feel like sometimes we make decisions when we don't have all the information that we really and truly need. And I think it's going to be that much worse this year.
Yeah,
So.
it's going to be worse.
Yeah, it will be. Yep, you're right.
Yeah. Jeff, you could go the flip side and try to go like -10 and see what happens.
Yeah, we could do that.
You could try.
In 08, 09, I had to do a -5 budget, a -10 budget, a level funded budget, and a +1 budget.
There you go.
Oh, good. So you got experience in.
Yeah,
You got my memo to my department heads then.
good times.
No, that's no fun.
Oh, man.
No.
Is there anything else that anybody else, does anybody have any other questions or anything else we want to cover before we meet again tomorrow? Or do people feel like they're good with the packet that they got and we'll just jump in tomorrow?
Well, Christine, can you just go over that Article 12 again? Because at one point we were talking about a special town meeting, then now we got this information. What exactly is coming before the board tomorrow?
So the request before the board was still to have a special town meeting. So the board will take that up tomorrow night as part of this discussion. But I think, we've talked that that's probably not the right approach at this point, especially given the weather, the fact that it snowed last week. Having an outdoor town meeting is probably incredibly difficult right now. So our recommendation would be to have an article at the annual town meeting, and we would appropriate the funding for the school budget out of that article, which we would take out of free cash.
So that's a two-step process. The money that is there now, the 600,000, almost 686, I think, or whatever the number is, that will at the end of the year will go into free cash.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. And then there's this special article that says that amount which is in free cash that is required to cover the
incremental costs.
A deficit in the school budget will be allocated from that free cash. So if at the end of the year, we get COVID and we get a CARES and we get this and we get that, and
then that article will be adjusted based on what.
Right. So if it's
like it's
200,000, it comes out. If it's 100,000, it comes out. But the balance of that will stay in free cash if it's not required in the school.
Correct. And then town meeting can decide where to appropriate that money.
And what about if there's a town deficit COVID related?
Same thing. So out of that
Yeah.
676, there's 115,000 for unrestricted government aid.
But is the assumption, if that's the right word, is the assumption that at the end of the year, we will have a school budget that was agreed upon last year pre-COVID,
Mhm.
and then a school's expenditure post-COVID, and it's what will come out of free cash is the post-COVID number?
Yeah, although the budget that we had at town meeting was what we were calling the post-COVID budget. So what
Now we're going to get into way too many
post-COVID.
the post-COVID.
I need a whiteboard. I need to see you people in person.
No, I mean, I get that, but I want to have the conversation.
It's like the overage caused by COVID.
Yeah, it's going to be any additional expenditures because the CARES Act in this 102 grant ends on December 30th. It's going to be any expenditures from January to June is the way I'm looking at it.
Right.
So absent an additional stimulus or CARES money that's allocated to us, we know we're going to have some bills to pay that we did not count on. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Now I will tell you, the selectmen have told me that I will not have any overages from January to June, and that I will be cutting to make that happen. So just getting that out there now.
Well, I mean, that's actually what I was moving toward. If that's the direction you're given there, that's the direction that the school committee is giving to the superintendent as well?
I can't obviously speak for the
No, I
school.
mean, I don't know, but I'm just saying, I throw that out as a rhetorical question.
Yeah, but I mean, I recognize that Jeff's got a much harder job than I have in determining whether or not school is remote, hybrid, or what they're doing. So their costs are higher than mine in terms of that.
Oh, indeed. But again, we come back to the one town, and I mean, let's face it, the free cash position is going to be critical to the schools.
Right.
Jeff, I really appreciate, I know you, and you, I'm just actually, I think I'm echoing what you said at the school committee meeting, that you brought up, recognizing that with the Dale Street issue coming up, with the Dale Street bond, the cost of money is going to be directly impacted. So when we go to a special town meeting with a proposal for a Dale Street cost, it's going to be affected by our ability to meet our financial policies
Mhm.
in free cash. So it's this is, I guess I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm not trying to preach, I'm sorry. But what I'm just saying is, this is a critical number for the cash flow, for the free cash, and for our reserves, as well as to cover what you need and are doing a great job managing to meet the requirements of the schools.
Mhm.
If that makes sense.
I think that's why when we all sat down and talked about it, doing an article at the annual town meeting was a better option than having a special town meeting at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Makes sense.
Well, alrighty then. Does anybody have anything else? Okay. Seeing none, same bad time, same bad channel tomorrow at 7. Right? Are we early in the agenda? I didn't even look at their agenda.
7 o'clock for this discussion, and then immediately following this discussion will be the Dale Street vote by the Board of Selectmen.
The
And
hits
then-
just keep on coming, Jeff.
I know.
Hey, no rest for the weary.
That's right. Speaking of Dale Street for a hot second, just because I believe it's also on the agenda tomorrow, you all probably know that somehow I got the warrant committee seat on like every freaking committee in town, if anybody's noticed that besides me. I have asked the selectmen to replace me on the Dale Street committee with my friend Bob Sliney, who has joyfully agreed to join that one and get me off of one of those. So-
Depending on the wisdom of the selectmen, I will either do that or you'll still have the job. But
Oh, you did no, yeah, no take backs, no take backs. But so yeah, so that should happen officially.
on that note, let me have a motion.
Yes. Would you like to make a motion?
A motion to adjourn.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, all right. Christine,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Newton,
yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
and me, yes. So see you tomorrow at 7, my friends.
Thanks,
Thanks
everyone.
again.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks everybody.
See ya.
Tomorrow.
Bye.